please. Thank you.
No problem.
Mortensen,
Here.
Aronson.
Here.
Burley.
Here.
Thank you. Fallon. Dan.
Here.
Thank you. Sorry. Held.
Here.
Thank you. Inken.
Here.
Sherburne, absent.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Next item on this afternoon's agenda is public comment. Anyone wishing to make public comment during this hearing should state their name and address for the record. Please be topic specific and limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. At this moment in time, I will open public comment for anything that is not on this evening's agenda. If you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand on the participant list or unmute yourself and turn on your camera and I will call on you. I am seeing no public comment at this time. With that, I will close public comment and open up to mayor and council comments. Council, any comment this afternoon? No. Can't tell if Dan's looking at his notes or going for his mute button. I have a few things I want to, this morning was the swearing in ceremony for our new county commissioners. And with that, I want to thank Karin Stegelmeyer and Thomas Davidson for all the work they've done over the past number of years for our community. I think a lot of the success and stability we've seen throughout the county in the past few months is a product of their good work and their leadership and really setting us up as a community to get through the pandemic and beyond. And I appreciate all of their efforts and want to make sure they are recognized for everything they have done to get us to this point. And also wish newly elected commissioners, Joshua and Tamara and Elizabeth, the best of luck, and know that I'm looking forward to working with them from the town of Frisco. And I think our community is in a great place now with amazing leadership at all levels across the county. So excited about that and welcome them to their new jobs. I also just want a quick reminder for folks, the county is opening up vaccine appointments for anyone over 70, and the more shots in the arms we can get, the better. So keep your eye out. If you're not signed up for the Summit Alerts, do that. That's how you get notice of those availability. So any other council comments? Great. Moving on to staff updates. If I go by the order of the agenda, Nancy, you want to start us off?
Yes, Mayor and Council, I do not have any updates, but I would like to turn over to the staff. I think there might have been one, but if not, it's okay. All right.
Okay.
You're good. Yeah.
Easy enough.
I do actually encourage our council to read all their reports, though. They have a lot of reports in there this time around. Some lengthy wording, I realize, but good information.
Great, thank you. I do like the new format of our agenda, and it does make it easier to digest the packets and the memos. So I appreciate that and staff's time with that. Then moving on, next item is the presentations of the 2021 grants. And if you give me a moment, I'd just like to say that the town of Frisco is proud to announce its continued support of local nonprofit groups through its 2021 grant process. The Frisco Town Council is proud to announce that we are awarding $71,600 in cash and $17,386 in in-kind donations to 49 organizations. $10,000 will go to college scholarships for Frisco High School seniors as well. Each year, the town of Frisco participates with other local governments in coordinated grant process. Frisco Town Council awards grants based on the project's benefit to the Frisco residents and in consideration of the results from past programs funded by the town. Grant process will take place in August. For more information, also please visit our website, friscogov.com. So we will help continue this grants and continue to keep our nonprofits thriving and our community strong. And I also want to thank our grant committee, council member Inkin and Mayor Pro Tem Burley for really stepping up our program and making it an exceptional process and really helping getting the money to where it's needed most. With that, I'm sorry this year we can't recognize you all in a group together in person, but we have your logos. I'll read your name of the organization, and your logo will get a little screen time, and I hope that suffices. And I want to thank you all for what you do. So with that, Deborah, we can just start clicking through, please.
Certainly.
Thank you. So first is Advocates for Victims of Assault, and they are getting a $4,000 silent auction package.
$4,000 and a silent
And a
auction
silent auction,
package.
sorry, excuse me, thank you. And Bethany Immigration Services, $2,000. And the Blue River Watershed Group, also $2,000. Breck Film Festival, a silent auction package. And the Breckenridge Montessori School, also a silent auction package. Breckenridge Outdoor Education Center, $1,200. And Building Hope of Summit County, $5,000. Casa of the Continental Divide, $1,200 and a silent auction package. And the Colorado 14ers Initiative, $500. Colorado Learning Connections, $1,500. And Colorado Mountain College Foundation, $1,000. And Damas Pisces, 28 tubing passes. Education Foundation of the Summit, $1,000. Family Intercultural Resource Center, a silent auction package. And Friends of the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, $5,000. Friends of the Dillon Ranger District, $5,000, and facility rental waiver. And the Girl Scouts of Colorado, $500. And the High Country Conservation Center, $5,000, as well as a silent auction package. On the High Country Soccer Association, a facility rental waiver. High Country Veterans Adventures, $1,000. And Mountain Dreamers, $1,000. Mountain Scholars, also $1,000. The National Repertory Orchestra, $1,000 and a silent auction package. Rotary Club of Summit County, $1,500. SOS Outreach, $1,000. Summit County Library Foundation, the Summit County Library silent auction package. Summit County Senior Center, a facility rental waiver. Summit Habitat for Humanity, $1,000. Summit High School Scholarships, $10,000. Summit Medical Center Health Foundation facility rental waiver. Summit Nordic Ski Club, $1,000. Facility rental waiver and a silent auction package. Summit Prosperity Initiative, $1,000. Summit Public Radio and TV, $3,500. Summit Tigers American Legion Baseball, facility rental waiver and silent auction package. Summit Youth Baseball, facility rental waiver and a silent auction package. Summit Youth Orchestra, facility rental waiver. Summit Youth Sports, $500. Team Summit, $1,500. The Cycle Effect, $2,200. The Peak School, $500. The Summit Foundation, a facility rental waiver and silent auction package. Timberline Adult Day Services, $5,000. Women's Resource Center of the Rockies, $1,000. Youth Entity, $2,000. We just want to thank you all. I appreciate everything all of our nonprofits do. I know this is the time where you normally get a standing ovation from all of council and those in the room, but know that you have our support, and we are impressed at your ability to get through these tough times in the past few months, and we look forward to the future and working with you. So thank you all so much.
And thank you for your patience with me as I sent emails and information was confusing. We will have the checks in the mail at the end of the month, and thank you for all that you do.
Great. Thank you, Deborah. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
Next item on the agenda is the work session. Agenda item number 1 for the work session is the childcare discussion. I will turn it over to Nancy. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Happy first meeting of the new year. I know everything has changed now that the calendar has changed, so that's good news, right? But Happy New Year to all of you. It's good to see you. We miss you all. We miss being together, but here we go. Continuing the work of the council. At your request, you asked to bring this item forward as a result of what we currently provide to what is called the Summit County Preschool, but in fact is here, right here in the town of Frisco. So that name can be a little bit confusing, but the Summit County Preschool has nothing to do with Summit County as an agency. It is a nonprofit preschool located here in the town of Frisco, as you know, and for many years been providing some kind of support. And the support has varied over the years, off and on, but on average ranges at around $65,000 lately. We've met with the school a number of times and talked about ways for the school to make sure that they're setting the right tuition amounts, make sure that they're looking for ways to do good fundraising. And we've talked with them about that particular.
I'm working. I'm working again.
Nora, your mic is on. Okay. I know you are working. All right. So we've talked with the school also about fundraising and offered help to them and that way. But at the same time, the conversation elevated council's interest in, are there other ways to provide funding to families of small children? And what is the real childcare issue here in Summit County or in the town of Frisco? Overall, there are not enough providers. That is the main issue. There are not enough providers. There are long wait lists throughout the county at the places that do provide childcare. All of you have some of your own information about it. Obviously, also our staff does. Also, Diane has a lot of direct information. So anything I don't remember to mention here, I'm going to turn it over to her at the end and ask if I left something out. She's done some information gathering as well. So as a background, we provide some money to the local preschool. They do serve about 70 students. Now recognize some of those are from the same family. On average, the number of students right now that are either town of Frisco, meaning the parents live here in the town of Frisco, students, or from employees who work within the town of Frisco jurisdictional boundaries or Copper area. It's about half of their students meet that. So looking at what are other ways in which funding is provided to families, and we did some research about all the different ways. They're varied, but essentially, let's give you some background. Some of this you may already know, so maybe you know all of it. In preschools itself, so we're just focusing on preschools. We have the one in Frisco, the one in Dillon in terms of the Lake Dillon preschool, 4 in Breckenridge. There's a church preschool as well. There's a Summit County District preschool programs offered through the district, pre-K though. This is primarily for kids the year before they go to kindergarten. They say it can be 3 or 4 years old, but it is essentially set up for the year you go to before you go to kindergarten. There are a couple of licensed in-home daycare providers. Surprisingly, there are not a lot of licensed in-home daycare providers because of the, and I say surprising because of the need is so great. Here in the town of Frisco, there are 2. There is one in the town of Breckenridge. These are licensed. There could be others that are not licensed. There are 4 located in the Dillon area and 5 in the town of Silverthorne. So there's not a lot of service providers for preschool itself. And so let's say you do find one and you get on the wait list and you get lucky to get in that particular either facility or the home. What kind of financial assistance is available? Laid this out in the report. There is different types of financial assistance, but let's start with the main one. It really funds directly from the state. The state program is set to help those in the county whose family or individual income is less than 85% of the median income, which bottom line is about 65,000 right now here in Summit County. That means 65,000 is 85% of the median income. So if you qualify, you can apply to Colorado's Child Care Assistance Program, which is CCCAP. And these programs, once approved, operate in different ways. They're paid through the county, and you can get reduced tuition. Those are for if you go to some preschools, but you have to qualify under a variety of criteria. The Colorado programs also help to offset the early Head Start programs that are offered at the schools. So Summit County also has funding that they provide the state funding, but they also have some funding to those programs through the Strong Futures Initiative. And that helps to offset the cost of preschool for parents who qualify as well. I mentioned already the school districts program. Also, our Councilmember Aronson, who serves on the board of the Summit Foundation, mentioned that they have some potential help. We reached out to them. They do provide almost $250,000 a year, or on average, $250,000 a year to help local families. And those are funded directly to nonprofits. They don't have a mechanism to support families. They fund the nonprofits. And then those nonprofits determine who qualifies and the funding source to provide the assistance. I've had a lot of discussion about the Town of Breckenridge's program. It's a unique program, especially recognizing the fact that municipal agencies are not legislatively obligated to provide childcare. So this is an optional program that the local jurisdiction of the Town of Breckenridge provides. It's tuition assistance program. It's a sliding scale, and it's meant to fill that gap between the funding available through state for those that meet 85% or below median income, and those who up to 150% of median income. Doesn't mean if you do qualify under the state program, you don't get Breckenridge assistance, because there could still be a gap in the total cost for you as a family so that you could still qualify. That's the intention of the program. It provides tuition assistance directly to offset the parent's tuition. So let's just look at the comparative here. If you're a child or family that lives here in the town of Frisco, or you work for an employer here in the town of Frisco, and you go to the Summit County preschool here in Frisco, and the tuition is lower, the families probably don't know that it's lower because the town is offering assistance to the preschool, or the school sets their tuition lower, variety of reasons. So the family members pay their price, but they're not necessarily seeing that direct benefit of the financial assistance. It's direct to them. We just don't know. It supports all 70 of the students. Town of Breckenridge, family member gets qualified. They choose which program they want to go to, and they get their, how much is the tuition going to be? And the town reduces that tuition. It's paid directly to the school. And I believe one or more council members have even direct experience, either currently or formerly, with this program, so they can even provide exactly what it's like. So the question for the council is, if you're considering doing a program of some kind, do we want to continue to provide assistance to schools to lower their overall operational expenses? It's basically a grant that goes to that school. That's a nonprofit. They see that as income across their top line. It reduces their, it's an offset to their expenses. Or do you want to set up a program that provides direct assistance to families, either or, both type of programs, or either or to the school? There, as noted in the report, in terms of financial impact to the town, if the council did decide to set up a program, a different program, a temporary program for assistance during the pandemic, a long-term program, or anything like that, it isn't currently budgeted. There's no direct funding source for a program like that. It's council's absolute right to direct funding to go anywhere they want. So you have the authority to set that funding. We don't have any additional funding. I was asked by one or more council members about any other funding sources. Well, sure, you could go to the voters and ask if they're interested in a new tax to support something like this. For example, on short-term rentals, to collect a few $100,000 a year, 500,000 or so, we would need to up our short-term rental tax by about 3.5% total. So almost doubling what we're doing right now. However, that's paid by visitors, primarily, almost in all cases, for short-term rental taxes. So that's a possibility. Any other funding we already get that goes into the general fund that you choose to direct to this program, you certainly have the authority to do that. However, it would be a negative offset to the general fund. In general, that's what the kind of childcare that's out there. There's in-home, there's programs all over the county, throughout the county. There is the pre-K before this at the school district. There's financial assistance to those earning, those meaning families or individuals, parents of children under 13 years old. I'm not sure I mentioned that. You have to make $65,000 a year or less into your family household income. But there isn't too much financial assistance, almost none, outside of the county or the town of Breckenridge for those earning more than $65,000 a year. And overall, we definitely have a lack of the number of folks we need to provide childcare. There is a lack, in essence, of supply. The demand is very high. So, Mayor, with your permission, I'd like to check in with Diane. She had a little bit of other information in case I missed anything.
That'd be great. Thank you. Welcome, Diane. Good to see you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. No, I think you did a great job summarizing everything within the county and what the options are available. I do believe there's another program too that came about for 4-year-olds enrolled in preschool. I think that was through the state and Governor Polis, if you remember that as well. So I think that 4-year-olds are able to go to the child care centers either free or at a reduced cost as well. But other than that, you summed up all the programs that are available throughout the county.
Thanks, Diane. Appreciate that. So I guess for our discussion and kind of direction is what is our goal with what we've done funding the preschool over these years and moving forward? How do we want that goal to meet some of our strategic plans, and also where people lean on the programmatic side of things? Do we want to continue kind of the way we are and maybe look at increasing that funding? Do we want to branch out and kind of follow some of the other community models? I'd be happy to hear from folks, and maybe those, I don't know, those who had more direct experience than I might have a better, but all I know is I've seen and heard the burden that childcare and preschool or pre-K has on families in this community, and it's unbelievable. And we have enough stresses as it is to live in this wonderful place. So Andy Aronson, I'll let you jump in, please.
Yeah, just starting with a question more than because I'm confused. Obviously capacity is a different issue than cost. So and I deal with this through the foundation as well. So different conversations. But on the cost issue, I'm confused as to all these programs that are out there. Is the reality that if you make less than $65,000 a year, you don't have a cost problem of childcare because all these programs cover it for you? So we're really talking about the forgotten middle class, or what am I missing? Like, I think before we start saying, what do we want to do? I need a better understanding of what the problem is and who's really being forgotten here that we're trying to help.
Is that for me, Councilmember Aronson?
Or whoever has the answer. And by the way, maybe we don't have the answer yet, but I would love to see the chart of at $65,000 a year, this is what childcare costs you. If you make $100,000 a year, this is what it costs you after all of the subsidies. So we can find.
Well, it varies. Not only is it a sliding scale based on your income, all of the centers charge something different. The in-home charges something different. They provide something different. Some are school-based, meaning learning-based. Some are babysitting. So the parents, for example, the Breckenridge program, along with some aspects of the county program and the Summit Foundation that provides it to nonprofits, you can choose which kind of program. So you may if you're getting support because you make less than 65,000, you may really be able to afford a little bit more and go to a different program because it's what you really want for your kids. So it's not a black and white answer. It is not if you make this amount, this is what your childcare is. It's childcare ranges, and I think Councilmember Burley can give us probably more direct information about what she knows about the rates. Childcare is very expensive here. It is very expensive. And your amount that you pay can be offset by a lot of state and through the county programs, even the Summit Foundation that's helping to offset those. But it's not going to be erased unless you're very, very low income. And then you have to be working. You can't, there is a program where actually if you're homeless and with kids, it's free, but that doesn't, really make sense. So I'm sorry, it's not a straight answer. It's expensive.
I realize that. It's just more trying to understand, how expensive.
Well,
I hate, because I didn't have kids here. I mean, I can tell you what childcare in the early 2000s cost in Delaware.
I can tell you
what does it cost to send a 2-year-old to childcare?
Okay, I can tell you right now. Okay, Councilmember Burley can answer.
A second mortgage.
I have employees.
No, it is literally. It's actually, for me right now, it's the equivalent of my mortgage. And I get assistance from the town of Breckenridge. So just to, I don't know if I'm going to answer your question, Andy, but the BRAC program, after doing a lot of research, determined that an appropriate level of a cost of childcare should be somewhere between 12 and 16% of your income. Just like you should be spending X amount of your income on food, X amount of your income on housing. They determined that the childcare should be 12 to 16%. In order for those childcare centers to provide the quality teachers and the services that they needed to, they were charging a tuition that was well above that. And I don't know exactly what the, what that percentage was prior to the tuition assistance, but it was pretty significant. And so the town of Breckenridge was looking at two things, I believe, when they started down this road. And that was both, how do we help the families, but how do we also allow those childcare centers to generate the amount of revenue they need to pay for their ongoing operation and quality teacher retention, and to provide education and ongoing training for those teachers as well. So the Breckenridge centers have very competitive salaries for the teachers compared to, my understanding, what the Summit County preschool teachers make. And so that's one of the problems that we have here in Frisco, is that we have a brain drain of teachers because they go to other centers, because those centers are able to raise more money to pay for those ongoing expenses. Here in Frisco, at least from what I've understood from their executive director, is that they're able to keep tuition just across the board, and in part with our assistance from Frisco, but they keep that tuition lower, and therefore she has to go out and find additional grant monies. She's constantly out there trying to fundraise in order to make up that gap. And so in Breckenridge, it wasn't just about how do we assist the families, but how do you close the gap between what the centers actually need for that teacher retention and ongoing operations, and then what you need to bring down so that the families are only paying that 13% of their income, which is what the council at the time determined was appropriate. So kind of, it's kind of twofold. We're not just trying to figure out how to help the families, but on the family side, well, and frankly, on the teacher side, in my view, it's helping us to retain those local families in our community, not just helping them get childcare, but like really, truly providing services where they're able to stay here in Frisco. And that meets one of our strategic goals, several of our strategic goals in this town. So for me, I'd like to see our 65,000 and potentially more, because we know that that's not going to get us very far, start to look strategically at the overall picture, not just how do we bring that tuition down for particular families.
Councilmember Aronson, I've had employees, knowing that we're talking about this, have shared some of their personal stories with me. One family is paying about $1,000 a month for part-time daycare for a very young child. I have other employees who have said it's more than my mortgage for 2 kids. So we already have a housing problem and recognize the housing is an issue. If to say, we definitely know that childcare is the cost of it very high. And also it is the fact that there are not enough providers. Having more providers, in essence, supply to meet the demand would help actually to bring down the cost, because the more suppliers, and once that supply demand imbalance starts to balance out, obviously the rates start to come down as well. The town of Breckenridge, I didn't mention, but Councilmember Burley, Mayor Pro Tem Burley alluded to that. They also provide, in addition to direct financial tuition assistance, they do provide funding to the schools to help retain and attract good teachers. Of course, we can't always look at Breckenridge as a direct comparison in terms of the amount of revenue they have available to expend on these kinds of things. But I do know that they are continuing to look at this issue. I believe it's on their agenda tonight. I'm not for sure, but I thought that's what the manager mentioned. But they have been continuing this work group to study the issue and look at them in the way Mayor Pro Tem Burley just mentioned. And that is their goal, is to try to keep it down around that 12 to 16% of your income. So you'll pay something, but it's in order to support their businesses and their local community and trying to keep employees at the town, as well as employees for their local businesses here in the county.
Diane, I see you turned your camera up, but it looked like Diane was wanting to make a comment as well, and you're welcome to come back, Diane, were you trying to get in?
Thanks, Mayor Mortensen. I just wanted to respond to Councilmember Aronson had asked for that number. And so Carrie, Nancy had provided that as well. The real example we have is for Summit County Preschool, 1 child, 4 days a week, $1,400 a month. And so you can, from there, you can do the math of how expensive childcare is. That's 1 child, 4 days a week.
You said 1,400, Diane?
Correct.
Andrew, is that a close enough talking around your question? Because it's a good question, I think.
Yeah, if it's $1,400 a month, that's $16,800 a year. And my view is, let's figure out, my thought process is, what does it cost to run a preschool? Like, there is a cost that is where we have as our starting point. That's what tuition can be. And then we help people be able to afford it is the next question. But we seem to be the conversation usually seems to come at it from both ways, is I can only afford to pay this, so that's what you should charge. But then the school needs to charge that in order to get the revenue. So somebody's got to pay the school the correct amount of revenue to allow them to exist, thrive, pay their teachers the appropriate amount. Then the question becomes, how is the school going to receive that money? Some from the parents and some from someplace else. So that's kind of why I was asking from the student side, how much does it cost? And it's $1,400 if we have conversationally $1,400 a month. From the school side, is that the right number?
Mm-hmm.
Or should it be $1,600 a month? And then we have to figure out how to find that extra $200 in the community. So that's, again, this is a really, in my head, I always am wrestling with, this is a very difficult conversation.
No, and I think you put it in a nice, maybe more simplified way to try to get our heads around it. Dan, go ahead.
I'm kind of going back to the preschool presentation of several weeks ago, where it sounded like, in terms of their direction, they're moving towards or they're moving towards raising their tuition aggressively over the next year or two. And the idea, I think, if I remember correctly, coming out of that meeting was, I think the model of, Andrew, to your point, of funding is for us to be helping then those families direct, on behalf of the families, we fund the school directly then. But I know they're moving, it definitely appears that they're moving their tuition to the realm of sustainability, where they won't be asking us. Now the question is, we pivot from supporting the school to supporting families. So I would say, to your earlier point, in terms of that threshold, you know, when you're on the cusp of that CCAP money, it's a really difficult place to be. And this is our personal experience. When we had our boys in preschool running a small business, you know, and it's even tougher now, I think, with housing costs having really escalated to where they are now. But when you're on that cusp of CCAP and you bump over it just a little bit and you lose all of that funding, it's a world changer. And I think I like, you know, the way Breck focuses on, it seems like, again, my experience with that CCAP program when our kids were in preschool was that it was astounding. It was outstanding. It was really, really great. It really allowed us to function as a family wholly, completely, and not feel like the pressure was so great that the stress was almost hard to deal with. So I like the idea of starting there and looking past that to the next, you know, that above 85% to the 150%. I think that world, that's the tough range right there. And I don't know, starting with where we're at 65, based on the numbers in the report that Nancy was talking about, it certainly appears that, you know, a starting point for funding that program would be higher, and that's reasonable, I think, to me. I would say right now, I'm not a fan of looking at any kind of a new revenue stream at this point, especially not short-term rentals.
Dan, can I just clarify that? Sorry. You're not a fan of identifying a new funding stream at this point, but getting the information, but going down the path of supporting families, pivoting towards that, and taking on that burden financially from the general fund for now?
Yeah, I think that's the play. I think, like, if I heard Andrew correctly, what he was framing, and I believe what we heard from the preschool presentation was they're moving their funding model towards, well, here's the tuition that we need to have to fund our program adequately. The criteria of their program being what it is. If whatever they're setting out there for their wage scale to attract the kind of providers and teachers and child mentors that they need, then it sounds like they're moving in that direction. So I believe it is appropriate for us to move more to a direct family funding model, I think.
Great. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. Rick, did I see you raise your hand?
Yeah, a little bit of both from Andrew and Dan's is, to Andy's point, we don't know what it costs to run that daycare. At least for the last 5 years, we've had reports come through that say they purposefully have lower tuition rates, and they've looked for subsidies over the years to help make up those differences. And that's where the town has come through on a few things, mostly capital things. So that number, I've never heard it. And I don't know that it's for town to figure out. I'm really encouraged to hear that they're increasing their rates so that they can have a sustainable funding model, at least on paper. And that's where I see the town, to Dan's point, having the ability for direct funding to the parents of the students. So that said, I just wanted to make another point to Andrew is I definitely know parents that when they've done the math, my son's older now, but we were at $1,200 a month for 5 days a week, even though we needed daycare or help 2 days a week, because that's just how the scheduling works. Just a little bit of insight of how that works. They can't plan their schedule around Rick's world. So it was, you pay for 5 days, buddy, if you want a seat, no matter how many of those you want. So you were locked into those rates, just as a reality check. Those rates have gone up over the years. And then another component of that is, I definitely know people where one of the caregivers has chosen not to work because their income did not offset the cost or was nominal with what the breakover point was with the money they were able to bring in the door. And back to, to Dan's point, that's that, maybe it's below the 85% and they have some funding in there, but I think Dan hit it with the 85 to 150. Andrew's point is, yeah, it's the middle, it may be that middle class group that we're talking about. And then this is contrary to Dan. I want to support I think tonight is a really healthy discovery discussion that we can ask for more information, but I wouldn't support a general fund. I would support an alternative, I want a sustainable funding mechanism, and robbing Peter to pay Paul to some extent, I don't think is where I wanted to go right now, since we've made all these other adjustments in the course of the last 9 months. Thanks.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, and I also know 2 people I know personally who they both quit their jobs because it was more cost effective for them not to work and take care of their kids. And that's an unfortunate decision to have to make. Andy, Held, I see, I'd love to hear your thoughts and where you kind of stand on the funding, and also we want to pivot towards a family style. I agree with that as well. I think, because I want to make sure we look at, Jesse, I saw y'all get you in a second, but I think we want to look at not just Summit County Preschool, because as we said, there are 2 more facilities in our town and in our community serving those children and families. And I think it's better to really get that broad reach and affect everyone and not focus on one entity. So the family model for me is definitely preferable for that reason. Jesse, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, one, I wish that we had captured how Andrew described the way he wrapped his head around this, because I think that's really kind of the basis for the methodology where we should start. And then to Dan's point, I agree with everything that Dan and Rick said, though I fall closer to Rick in terms of a long-term funding source. I don't think we need to necessarily figure that out right this second. I think that we could start a program and make it, I think we can provide a stopgap through the general fund sooner rather than later, but I think an ongoing funding source would be really appropriate. But I think we need to do our due diligence and poll the community and try and figure out what it is exactly that they want to. And then Hunter, to your point about the in-home daycares, we might find that their tuition is appropriate and that people can afford them. And the fact of the matter is there's just not enough of them. So we may find doing this exercise that we don't need to support them, but I would like to include them in the conversation and certainly better understand how they are operating. Because I think it's just an equity issue. I think we don't need to just focus solely on the Summit County Preschool, but otherwise I support everything that has been said here with the addition of some sort of funding source into the future.
I think the next update in Zoom is an instant replay feature, so we can figure out what Andrew said. But Andrew, go ahead, and then I'll come to you, Andy Held.
I heard a rumor from Deborah that we are taping these things. So please don't ever ask me to re-say something that I just said, because I can't do that. But one thing that I just, let's frame it again. $1,400 a month times 12 months is $16,800 a year. There are 35 of our residents with students there. That's only $588,000. So if we said, and I'm not proposing this in any way, but this is our worst case conversation. We're going to give free daycare tuition to every Frisco resident or employee. That conversation is going to cost us $588,000. This isn't, that is a number that is a manageable number before we start talking about, all the new revenue streams. And we all know that not everybody goes every day. Not all the people need any assistance. So that's a number. The other thing that I do want to put on the table is, wherever this all goes, is we don't have the ability, nor should we, to control what this school is called. But I really think somebody should tell somebody over there that the Summit County Preschool is not the best name. Whether it's the Frisco Preschool or the 10 Mile Preschool, I don't really care. But from our goal of making this a better place for people to live, I love having this school be something other than the county's school. Somewhere or another, it needs to be Frisco's school. So that's just an aside.
Thanks, Andrew. Andy, Held, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I am relatively in agreement here. I just don't want to, pull the carpet out from underneath the preschool and or any of the smaller operations. Our plan should work in conjunction with what their plan is, as Dan was saying. That is what I think was proposed to us. So we have that amount, I forget what it is off of the top of my head, that we give directly to the preschool. But then also to Andy's point, we're not going to fully fund everyone that's going there. So, what are we talking about? $100,000, $200,000 or something like that. I think we do need to come up with a revenue stream for that. We shouldn't just be taking that right out of the general fund by any means. I am in favor of going to the voters with an extra tax. I don't know if short-term rentals is the place that the only place that we have that ability or option. But we need to identify the revenue stream. We need to identify how much we're talking about. My kid went to the Sonoma County Preschool here in Frisco. Literally, once we went to elementary school, we could buy in Frisco. We were able to put those funds toward our mortgage in Frisco, and that enabled us to move here when we couldn't afford to otherwise. So it's a big nut for anyone, and it's important. But I don't want to pull the rug out from underneath the preschool. We have to work together with them as far as how this funding all comes together. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, Dan. Well, try again on the mute button, Dan.
Yeah, sorry. So in terms of a revenue stream, I want to be clear. I don't know that we need a unique new revenue stream. I would challenge us to look within the budget. Our budget is not immutable. There seems to be an inherent assumption that to find this money, we have to look outside the existing budget, and I don't buy that. So if this is rising to this level of priority in terms of funding, then I would look first within the existing budget. Frisco does pretty well. And I know even in the last year, we've done surprisingly well. And before, I would support a new revenue stream that had anything to do with taxation. I would want to make sure that we've exhausted from a prioritization standpoint and a value-driven conversation about why childcare is more important than, pick any 3 things in the budget that you think should be replaced by that. The other comment, going to Andrew's 588,000, I don't think we're obligated to pay for childcare for everybody in Frisco. There's a reason why there's day jobs and there's a reason why there's night jobs. And for many years, our family walked that walk. Someone worked during the day, someone works at night. These are some of the sacrifices you make. So before, and I know this is part of a value-driven conversation about inclusivity and how, to what degree we spend to create that level of family inclusivity in Frisco, but there's plenty of work out there. And, I don't want to be necessarily the fly in the ointment, but I definitely support, don't get me wrong, funding childcare. It's a game changer for families, but I don't believe we need to fund it all. To be clear.
And I think Andrew's point wasn't what I think he was showing us either the best case scenario if we wanted to fund it for everybody, or worst case scenario if we kind of had to. So I think he was just showing off his calculator skills of what that would look like on a big picture. So
no, I understand. In terms of identifying boundaries, those are mine.
Yeah, that's good. So I think I'm hearing pretty good consensus that we're the family kind of driven focus without pulling the rug out, as Andy Held said, from the preschool as is kind of a direction we want to pursue and see what those needs are and what the scope of how many families are we talking about of need and what that need looks like. I think the revenue side of things is definitely an easier conversation once we look at how much potentially this is going to cost as a program. Just to get my feelings out there, I kind of fall in Dan's category more, that I do think we can find a money in our budget that we already have, but I'm not stuck to any one thing. I think it's more important to take care of the kids and the families that need it, and that we can help, because I think that does create what we see as a thriving community and meets a lot of our goals. So Nancy, how do you feel about some of the direction you've heard from this conversation? And
well, what I want to do about not what I feel, but, yeah, so I just want to be clear. So we want to survey our local residents a little bit more. I think we'll go directly to I'm just typing notes while that's what I do. And so I think I'd probably go to the preschools and the county that has all the data, to see how many people are on wait lists, what that means. I heard Councilmember Aronson's comment about the worst case scenario, but that's only for those kids who go to that school. There's a lot of kids that aren't going. Their friends are picking it up. People are making different kinds of decisions because they couldn't get into the preschool. It has a very long wait list. So that's true for those kids at that school. It's not true in terms of if the council had a decision that you wanted to provide free tuition, what's the worst case number? It's probably much greater than that. So we want to find out what the need is, and we'll see if we can figure that out through surveying those who get childcare through the county. If they'll give us that information, can ask for the wait list information. Community survey, we wouldn't do a statistically valid one, more of a survey monkey, and put it out through social media and see if we can get some intel that way. They'll all be kind of rough ideas. Breckenridge spends, it's around $1.5 million a year on their programs. They dedicated marijuana funds, interest earnings, and one other funding source, but they are looking at new funding sources because that's unstable. So I have direction to try to get additional information as to what the need is. I have a sense that you all support providing some kind of help.
Nancy, is Breckenridge open enough to tell us how many of their kids are going to daycare and how much the average per child is that they're supporting them?
Yes, that's a public record. So Breckenridge can give us their public information, how many of their employees are utilizing.
No, how many, basically it's how many kids are they subsidizing and how much does it cost per kid? And we can just figure
We
similar
can find that in council packets. They have a standing child care committee and they give regular committee updates to the board. So it's very transparent.
Great.
Again, I am a fiscally conservative, responsible town manager. So I just want to put on the record here. Breckenridge has 10 times the revenue of the town of Frisco. That's 10 times. They have.
I would think but I agree, and I think they potentially also have 10 times the amount of children in that community. I mean, it's
that could be
comparatively.
In terms of their ability to find discretionary revenues, a little bit different. They have a very, very unique situation in that they were able to have an agreement with the resort for funding that you won't find pretty much in any other jurisdiction. So anyway, that's just, I just remind you, because we can't necessarily meet that, but they do have good information. In fact, they're doing some surveys coming up that I think they're pretty open about sharing information. We can absolutely find out what they're paying and what their cost is, and they have a lot more employees. So once we find out, let's say the need is, I come back to you and say, you know what, there's this many approximately parents who are not being assisted. This is what we think the need is. We really couldn't put our handle on it for sure. However, what would you like me to bring back in terms of funding source? The general fund, we just cut significant amounts of money out of the budget going into this year. So you have access to the budget. It just got posted. It's online. Do you want us to look at ways in which we can think we could come up with $500,000? That's a big bundle of funds. So I'm not sure what you want. And
I think we need to see what the needs are and what that range is within Frisco across kind of that level of that many families to see what we would be on the subsidizing or helping with, because I don't think we know that. And I think that's if we can get a close proximity of that information, then we continue the conversation of, okay, now we know how much, if we want to make this happen for that range of, say, this 85 to 150% AMI, we know what that will cost us based on the carrying capacity of the amount of kids in the programs in Frisco. Now, what do we want to do about funding it? I think for me, I'd like to see, and I'd like to hear council quickly, I need those numbers before I can think of a revenue stream, because I don't know what we're talking about before we can try to figure out what kind of monies we're looking for.
Yeah, it depends whether you want a one-time, sort of pandemic assistance. I heard some interest and we need help right now. We do have some funding, one-time funding in our reserves and our set aside and our more revenue than we anticipated aside of the positive net fund balance. So, but long-term funding streams, if the council wants a new funding stream, I mentioned that. Oh, by the way, somebody did ask, is that the only source of new funding streams? No, you could always increase sales tax. You have to go to the voters, of course. But it's those two, general sales tax, or so it's sales tax in one way or the other. It's property tax in Frisco is nil. It's very, very little. So you'd still go to the voters for property tax. Mind you, I lived my whole life in California where property tax is very high. So people do not realize how good they have it here. So that's also a funding source. But to designate it to a specific use, that's a different kind of question to the voters. We can talk about that later. I'll get additional information where I can and try to provide the council a sense of approximately what the need is. Know that we have no way to tell you exactly what that would be. So let's say you decided, okay, we're going to put 500,000 a year to it. It would be a lot like the rest of these programs. Whatever they have allocated, they being either the county, the state, the town, once it's out for that year. So either it's first come or it's a sliding scale. Everybody applies by a specific date and they give out the funds. So it might shift to being $1,000 per family one year, $750 another year, $1,200. It depends on how many kids are in the program, if you wanted to fund that.
Andrew, did you want to say something?
Yeah, only Nancy, I feel like you're trying to think much further down the road, where my sense of the conversation is this is not COVID relief. This is a long-term program that we're having a conversation about that doesn't need immediate action, immediate budget ramifications, nor would we be even approaching $500,000 because my number dismissed any budgetary grants from the state. It was just like, I can't imagine we would be anywhere close to that unless something is missed or somebody opens up a new daycare facility. So everybody on the wait list, like right now, we're capped at what we have. So the conversation isn't about more kids on the wait list. Kids, we can make it free. They're still on the wait list.
Yeah.
So that doesn't change that conversation. So
the wait list.
I would, that's what I say. I would just, let's see what the data brings us as far as the need and what sort of the numbers turn out to be, and then we can decide what to do. And I also just, again, we're only limited in our ability to generate revenue by our lack of creativity. I mean, I'm not reopening a conversation, but we can have a new revenue stream at the PRA, or we can do something, it's not just tax and spend, it's, we have other options. So let's let this one play out a little more slowly.
Yep. Agreed. Jesse, were you getting in to say something? Or are you good? No. Okay. Does that help, Nancy? Did that kind of clarify?
I'm gonna get
Okay.
as much data as I can.
And we
I
know that,
heard it's not an emergency. Okay.
and that it will be tough data to come by. So there will be some assumptions that you will and staff will have to make, and we understand that as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, I think, there is a lot of data about families in need in the county. But that gap range between 65 and 150% of the median income, not as much data, but I think we can make some assumptions and give you some rough numbers. And we'll come back with that.
Great. Thank you. Anything up before we wrap this one up? All right. Then we'll move on to work session agenda item number 2. And that is the Historic Resources Survey, the presentation of the potential final draft. And I will turn it over to Nancy. Are you kicking this one off, or is Susan?
This is going to
Oh,
Susan.
there's Susan. For some reason, Susan, I did not see your camera show up. Apologies,
That's okay.
Susan. Welcome. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Town Council. We're here to present the final draft of the Historic Resource Survey. This has been a project that's a couple of years in the making. Town Council originally requested that we pursue this survey in order to obtain some basic information, some baseline information on the historic resources within the town. So this survey is being conducted through a grant from the State Historical Fund. So it follows their established guidelines and requirements for the format of the report and the inventory. And so I'm going to pass it off to Susanna Reed. She's an architect specializing in historic preservation, and she has been completing the survey for us. I just wanted to take a second to remind Council that this is not an exhaustive list by any means, and Susanna can explain a little bit more about the criteria for the properties that wound up on the list. And also, this survey really doesn't have any regulatory effect. It's simply information to help us better understand what resources we have in the community. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Susanna Reed, who's here with us tonight.
Hi, everyone, and good evening. And I think I will just launch into the PowerPoint here. So can I, oops. There we go. Can everyone see? I can't see
Yep.
you.
Yep, we can see it. Looks good.
There, okay. So as Susan said, we kind of started this process to start to get a handle on the question of what does Frisco have and what do we do with it? So basically the survey answers the first question of what does Frisco have? And we basically undertook the project to understand the broader story of Frisco's history, kind of look around, see what buildings are left that represent that history, and then to document those buildings in detail. And so the materials that you get at the end of this kind of project are an inventory form on each property that we selected and an overall report that describes the context of the historic context of the town. And the report kind of sets the tone for kind of the broader trends of what's going on in Frisco at what time periods. And then it's easier to look around and see how the buildings that we see around town relate to those broader trends. So that, and each of these forms includes maps and photos that talk in general about the town. And this is a document that can be used in future surveys, or even when a property owner that wasn't in the survey comes to you to want to talk about the historic significance of their property. And then the forms themselves have a lot of information on them, and I'm just gonna skip kind of ahead. The most important stuff on the forms for you guys, I think, is the historical associations, the things, the people that are associated with the property, that moment in time that's associated with the property, and kind of all the way up into present day. The significance and integrity are really the two tools that you're going to use going forward to talk about what might be of value to the town in terms of a preservation program. And then again, survey form has photos and maps of each structure. So I'm going to talk a little bit just quickly about this idea of significance and integrity. And the significance is really how a property relates to the historic trend. And for the most part, we talk about architecture as being the area of significance that really is what we're looking at when we look at the buildings. The integrity is kind of what's left of that historic building. How does it continue to convey its significance and its history? And you'll see as we go forward, integrity has 7 aspects: location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And a building can be talked about in terms of all those 7 aspects and how much remains of the building that meets those criteria. Then the other side of the coin is the context, which is what the report is really about. And for the most part, these are the National Register criteria. These are, and criteria C is really the one that we're talking about. It's about buildings, a type of building, a method of construction, something that defines a period in time and how it defines that period in time. These, the context, and the significance and integrity all are what feed into the narrative that's produced on each of the individual forms. So to select the 26 sites that we ended up with, we started out with kind of 3 lists. We drove around town, looked at everything, took pictures of everything, kind of took a stab at what I thought might have some kind of historic quality, regardless of the condition it was in, regardless of how many changes had been made to it. And I made my list, and that was probably 60 to 70 buildings. And then I compared that with the assessor's office data on construction date and eliminated most of the things that were kind of from the mid 40s onward. There are a couple of 1950s buildings in the survey. And then I took the historic property inventory that had been completed by the Historic Park and Museum and compared that to my list. And then we kind of focused on what we thought were the buildings most at risk, which is the core area of town: Main Street, Galena Street, and a few things on Granite. And then we have 2 other outlying properties that we included. So we ended up with the 26 properties that basically go from the 1880s to the 1950s. And as Susan said, it's by no means comprehensive. And in fact, there are probably a lot of things in the residential neighborhoods from the 30s, 40s, and 50s that, that warrant being looked at as a group in themselves. We really tried to focus on the earliest things that were still out there in the town, not included in the historic park. So here are all the buildings in chronological order, and you can kind of begin to see, what a pattern emerging of kind of what's typical remaining around town that's still there, that's kind of typical. And my guess is that this 420 Galena is probably the quintessential 1880s residential house in Frisco. And you can see it in this house with a side wing addition that came later. In this house, also with a side wing, that came later, and kind of this very simple form of building. And then as we go further along, there's still just a whole series of very simple buildings, simple front gable buildings that have been altered and changed over time. And I think it's just really interesting to start seeing how in the early part of the 20th century, things got a little bit more elaborate. Things, you know, had more larger, more kind of design detail, that sort of thing. And then, of course, going into the 30s, there was a lot of kind of reclaimed material buildings and things that were very much about just kind of getting through that period of time, which was a very quiet period of time in Frisco's history. And then kind of the most important part of this, I think for your use going forward, is how is this integrity issue. And so what I did as part of the process was group buildings based on their integrity. And these 6 buildings really are the ones that retain the most historic integrity of all the 26 that we looked at. And that means that they're basically unaltered. They may have a few things that have been done to them, but basically they're in their same condition that they were. They have their same materials. The window openings and windows haven't been changed. The form is still, you know, completely intact. That sort of thing was what I'm looking at. And you'll see they're not the fanciest buildings. They're not, you know, the most elaborate or the largest, but these are the ones that really kind of continue to tell that's the story of that moment when they were built. The other thing I should mention is that, you know, Frisco, it seems, has a long history of moving buildings. And so the area, the location aspect of integrity is one that I basically ignored unless it was really a dramatically different location. And so that, even though some of these buildings obviously have been moved, and the 420 Galena was moved probably back in the 1880s, I kind of didn't penalize the building as much as I might have in other communities because of the move. So. Okay. So then there's group 2, and group 2 includes buildings that have had some alteration, but are basically still intact. Buildings that may have had windows replaced, but the window openings are still good. Buildings that may have had an addition, but the form is still recognizable. Things like that. And group 2 is the biggest group that we have. And now for some reason, my keyboard is not working. Oh my God. Anyway. Then we have group 3. Group 3 are a bunch of buildings that have a fair amount of alteration. They're still recognizable, but a lot has been done. And this is the group that really is that point of discussion of what do we keep? What do we value as historic? You know, how far do we want to go? And I think this group kind of epitomizes the decisions that have to be made. Like 205 North 3rd has had a lot of alteration. It still looks, you know, looks like it's from the era, but all the detail, all the decoration, all that stuff isn't original. Similarly, 208 Main, the false front probably isn't original. And those two things kind of send a false sense of history of what might have actually been here at that time period. So that's why they're on this list. And then 212 Galena and 113 Granite have some historic materials, but not many. And the forms have been changed, but they're again still recognizable. And then I think 306 Galena actually is almost completely replaced everything. but the pattern of windows and doors is the same, the form is the same, that sort of thing. So that kind of gives you a sense of the broad criteria that goes into making up group 3. And then there's group 4, which are buildings that have completely lost any connection to what they originally were. And this idea of, you know, they may still be important to the community as buildings that exist in the community, but they really are not historic preservation candidates. And I think 301 Main also adds to that whole dialogue of what the kind of level of false history that's being introduced into the conversation, because the false front is not original. And it's such a strong element that it overpowers the historic building that remains there. So I apologize for this sort of jumping around thing. The other thing that I think that's interesting about Frisco is that there are a lot of really good outbuildings that are left around town. And while many of these are included on the sites that were inventoried, you know, there's reference to these buildings that maybe there should be a discussion about how important these are to the community, and maybe think about, is there a way that we can encourage the preservation of outbuildings in such a way that maintains that character that's provided by the existence of those buildings. So let's see if this will work. Finally, sorry, my keyword's not working. So basically, I think there are things left in Frisco that are worth preserving, that are both on private property and are owned by the town, you know, that are out there in the town site. And really if the question, you know, gets turned over to you guys, how, you know, how do you feel about this group of buildings, and what do you think the best approach to preserving them is? Is there a desire to preserve privately owned buildings and to figure out a program that helps private property owners carry out that preservation? I think public engagement is critical, and I think you have a really great framework in Frisco for that type of discussion. From what I know, you know, you guys are very engaged with talking to the community, and that's great. The preservation of the town-owned properties like the Excelsior and the Granite Street properties is an opportunity to really set an example for the town and how you want buildings to be treated. And so that's always a good first step. And then obviously the outbuildings and the continuation of surveying, and keep looking around and keep talking about the broad trends of Frisco's history, like skiing and tourism, which really brought Frisco out of the doldrums. So I'm gonna just go to this last slide first. So the next steps basically are for me to wrap up the report. I have been trying to collect a bunch of historic photos to add to the report, and some more maps. And I obviously have typos and clarifications to add to that. That should be done in the next week or so. And then all of these draft materials get submitted to the state, and they get 6 weeks to review the materials. And then once I get their comments back and integrate their comments, then at that point, the project is final, and you will get a digital copy of everything, as will the state. So please, I know I kind of ran through that quickly, but questions, comments, anything?
Thank you, Susanna. I appreciate that. Any comments, feedback, questions before we approve this to go as a final draft to the state? And Andy Held, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Susanna. It's great to see a lot of these buildings identified and in one place. And, it's important. I know that a building can no longer be on the National Historic Registry if it's been moved. But I think it's important for the character of the town that we keep some of the look that we started with. And so thanks for your work. I'm in favor of what you're doing.
Thanks. I would just mention that the town really has the ability to craft any kind of local preservation program it wants. Whatever suits the community is the best thing for the community. So the issue of properties being moved, things like that, the town can decide that that's not an important component if that's what they feel. So.
No, thank you. Other comments? Andrew.
Briefly, couple things. One is I don't have strong opinions of where we go from here, but I really did enjoy reading the report. Meaning, whoever wrote it, it was a really good chronology. I've read a lot of books on Summit County history. This was really nice to see Frisco history. So job well done. But I hope we take this somewhere, even if it's creating placards of before and after scenes, that picture on the cover, if we had a sign, for lack of a better word, on Main Street looking at the same place as it does now, just as a historical reference, even if we don't control the buildings and things. So it was a job well done. I hope we do something with it. I'm not sure what. The only other thought is I actually value, as I drive around town, as we converted from a mining town to a ski town, obviously some people came in with ski architecture, and we have these little old chalets that are floating around. And I actually hope that as we progress with whatever we do, that we can acknowledge them as architecturally relevant to our history.
Absolutely. And that's kind of in that mid-century period that's getting so much attention right now in many communities.
Anyone else? Other thoughts? Everybody good? Allowing Susanna to move forward and submit this to the state with.
Okay.
Great. I appreciate all your work. It was a great report to read. And Susan, thanks for your help, and also everyone over at the Historic Park. It's always fun to see where we've come from. I think it's important. So I appreciate that.
Great. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Great. Thank you too. Excuse me for a second while I search for my agenda again. Does folks like to take a quick break? 5 minutes. All right, let's do that. Let's take a 5-minute break, come back, and we'll roll through the remaining parts of the agenda.
Hunter, do you think you will be signing documents tomorrow? Ooh, you're muted.
You're right, I am. Sorry. Probably
That's
for the best. Be back. Everybody good to get rolling again? Excellent. Then we are recording, and oh, did I do that? I didn't mean to. No, my camera's jumping around for some reason. Sorry about that. Quick distraction. Moving on to the consent agenda. Perhaps a motion.
I'm getting there. Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Burley. Is there a second?
Second.
Been seconded by Councilmember Aronson. Can you call the question, please?
Thank you. Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley,
Yes.
Fallon,
Yes.
Held,
Yes.
Incan.
Yes.
Thank you. Sherburne, absent.
Thank you. Consent agenda is approved. Moving on to new business. This is agenda item number 1. It's the first reading of ordinance 21-01, an ordinance amending chapter 124 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Frisco concerning public health and safety by amending Article 2 thereof concerning a disposable bag fee to establish a prohibition of the use of plastic bags and certain paper bags, and to amend provisions concerning fees for the use of permitted disposable bags. I will open up the public hearing and turn it over to staff. And Gilly, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. So since we covered a lot of what we would be discussing regarding the ordinance back in December at the work session, I just wanted to, go over some big picture items. So this is essentially a ban on single-use plastic bags and any paper bags that are less than 40% post-consumer waste. And I've been getting some questions, so I'm just going to go over all of those. So starting with the fee. The fee is going to remain the same. It's just that plastic bags will be removed from the equation. So we've gathered approximately $82,000 in bag fees for 2020. And that was even during Q2 when those bag fees were paused for a moment. And we still have not yet counted everything from the last quarter. So a great example of how this will function if we do decide to pass this bag fee is Whole Foods. They remit the bag fee. They charge the bag fee, but they do not provide their customers with any plastic bags. So that's what that would look like. And then, so essentially the goal of this ordinance is to further encourage the use of reusable bags. And what we are asking for is already in place in the whole state of California. And the 40% post-consumer waste bags is nothing extraordinary for any businesses. Even City Market in Dillon, the paper bags that they provide are 40% post-consumer waste. And just to address another question regarding the pros and cons of plastic versus paper bags. So plastic bags, plastic single-use bags do in some instances use less resources to generate and ship on a one-to-one basis than paper bags, but they're not recyclable, whereas paper bags are. It's true that you can create a recycling program for single-use plastic bags, but in Summit County, it would likely need to be a separate stream. And so those bags could not be placed in the single stream recycling, whereas paper bags can be placed in single stream recycling as it stands right now. And if we were to create a plastic bag recycling program, that would be one, a huge effort, and two, it would be a very, very big educational effort, just because plastic bags really ruin and kind of mess up the scrap machinery that they have to use for recycling. It gets stuck in the rotors. So there could be potential for, additional contamination if we were to pursue that route. Whereas again, plastic bags or paper bags, sorry, can be recycled as is. And then as far as how the money will be spent from the fee, it is no different from how the money is currently being planned to be spent from the 2020 fee. I have it budgeted for some wildlife-proof containers, reusable bags for residents and visitors, and education and administration of the fee, and the potential bag ban if we decide to pursue this. And then last, I wanted to address a question about farmers markets or temporary vendors. The direction that I believed I received from council in December was to not include farmers markets or temporary vendors in this. So the way that I have worded the ordinance is to apply to all retailers and restaurants, whereas the fee will only apply to retailers rather than having the ban apply to retailers, restaurants, and temporary vendors like farmers markets. I hope I was able to answer some of your questions, but yeah, I'd just like to open it up for more questions.
Great, thank you, Gilly. I appreciate that and addressing the kind of overarching concerns. Any specific follow-up questions for Gilly before we open up for public comment? No, Rick, please, and then Andrew.
Sure. Hey, Gilly. So I'm going through the ordinance. I just don't, and I probably just missed it, but where does it talk about the fee one? And then, so that I'm clear, my question number 2 is, as I understand that if someone gets any bag, so the 40% post-consumer paper bag, that is subject to the fee. The only other option is no bag, no fee, period.
And make sure you're looking at the second attachment, which is the red line version. I was confused for a while because the old ordinance was included as attachment 1. So just make sure you're looking at the right attachment.
Yes, so where it talks about the fee is under 124-16, disposable bag fee established. And then it continues on to retention, remittance, and transfer. And then specifically 124-18-G looks at how the town can spend the funds that are generated by this.
Got it. I just scrolled down to that. So thank
Okay.
you. I did the first couple of times I went over it. And then part 2.
Yes, you're exactly correct. So either it is if you were to go to a grocery store in Frisco, it would be that you would either receive that 40% post-consumer waste paper bag and be charged a fee, similar to now, or you would bring your reusable bag and not be charged a fee.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Or the boxes, what I see a lot of people doing, which is great.
Yeah, the boxes work too. I believe Whole Foods gives those out for free.
Any other, Andrew Aronson, did you have yeah, go ahead.
Clarification, I'm a little bit confused. Wasn't really clear. If I go to a restaurant, if a restaurant's providing me to-go food, they can do whatever they want? Can they,
No.
can they give me my to-go food in a plastic t-shirt? I call them t-shirt bags, but.
Yeah, no. So this would require them to conform to the new definition of a disposable bag, which is that 40% post-consumer waste paper bag. So they would not be able to give you a plastic bag. However, you would not be charged a fee for getting a bag from a restaurant for to-go food.
And is that the same for our temporary vendors? They can't use plastic, but they can give me my piece of art in a paper bag.
From the last council discussion, I did not include temporary vendors in this, so they would still be able to give you a plastic bag. However, if council would like to change that direction, I can amend it to have those temporary vendors be required to conform to the new definition of a disposable bag.
Okay, I don't have a strong opinion on what we do with them. I think it's a little bit, we should spell it out a little clearer of prohibited disposable bags apply to restaurants and retailers, but not, just that it applies to restaurant retailers and whoever else. Okay. That's it.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, seeing no further council questions, I will open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand feature or turn on your camera and microphone, and I will call on you. And while we're waiting for that, Nancy, do we have any public comment to read into the record this evening?
Yes, Mayor and Council, I did receive a comment and asked that I share this with the council, and this is from the owner of Silver Hills and Kemosabe, Bob Starkow. His comment is, I truly think this is an appropriate time to table this ordinance. The business community has enough explaining to do to customers these days, what with extra costs of doing business, with cost of COVID, loss of business, cost of loans, and simply trying to stay viable without more ordinance, however well intended. Thank you for passing this on to council.
Thank you for reading that, and I appreciate always Bob's involvement. Are there other public comments? Sorry, check the. Okay, seeing no additional public comment, I'll close public comment and back to council discussion. And I do appreciate Bob Starkow's comments. I think, specifically his industry is a little bit exempt, and we have a fair amount of lead time before this is being implemented. And I hope by the time this comes around, the additional effects of what we've been living through will not be an issue at that point in time. So,
And
Jesse.
to add to that, Hunter, and thank you for the reminder of the lead time. This goes into effect in September. So the intent is that people can use up their existing inventory and not be burdened by, the changes immediately. And I think it is the perfect time to be making these broad steps, because the amount of single-use plastic and waste that has come into the marketplace because of COVID, because of the fears around sanitation and all of the just kind of unnecessary fallout from COVID, this is exactly the time when we need to be taking, aggressive action to limit single-use disposable plastics, but also just single-use disposable products in general. So while I realize this can be a little bit of a burden, I think that the lead time is appropriate, and we need to be, getting ahead of this.
Appreciate that, Jesse. Thank you. Other council comments? If not, Andy Held.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate where Bobby's coming from. But as we are just creating more trash due to COVID, especially with all the to-go, we're going to be now putting our styrofoam containers into our paper bags, which, does that really make a difference? I think we need to take bigger, bolder moves, like how do we get rid of that stuff too? How do we do it where we make an incentive program for, you bringing your own containers in for restaurants to fill. And I know during COVID, that's not a great option. But this is a thing. And then the other deal is we are still during COVID, and I don't want to put too much onus or pressure on small business to change, how they're operating for this moment. But I think we still have to take steps in the right direction because this moment may go on for a long time, and just creating more trash shouldn't be an option at this point. But it's where we're at. So it kind of puts me on the fence of either way. I'd like to hear what everybody else says. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Dan.
General question on the fees collected so far, maybe for Nancy. Is this flowing into the general fund, or like the nicotine tax, is this set up as a separate a separate balance, separate line somewhere.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Councilmember Fallon, this goes into the general fund. It is not a separate fund. We do account for it separately, so it has a line. And we have dedicated the funding partly to Ms. Plogg's salary and as she mentioned, some of the other things that are budgeted. But we collected far more than we anticipated, so it's not all budgeted. If you're looking for a funding source.
No, I wasn't going there. I mean, this would be horrible. I mean, in theory, and based on what I understand about the effectiveness of bag fees versus bans, you know, successfully implemented bag fees versus bans have been successful at a rate that, as the funding source, it diminishes pretty rapidly. So certainly wouldn't be going in that direction regardless. But you know, I guess for me, I was hesitant about this, you know, in the first conversation to get to this point. And really in light of what's happened on the national stage this week, I'm just very, very sensitive right now to a do as I say, not as I do kind of legislative approach to solving this problem. If this is in fact prohibited at the state level, I'm worried about, and again, I'm more concerned now than I was several weeks ago. And again, I'll stipulate the clear and present danger of, you know, of all the deleterious effects of plastic environment, starting with, but not ending with plastic bags. So I don't want to, I mean, I get it, but I'm struggling mightily with this idea from a precedent setting standpoint that any municipality can kind of cherry pick what they like and don't like. And again, understanding the import of the subject, you know, I've been struggling with making sure this rises to a level where we eschew or disregard, you know, a state prohibition on passing a ban. And wondering why at some level where other plastic bag fees have achieved a high level of mitigation when it comes to plastic bag proliferation, approaching 90% in some areas. Is it just of our fee? And so anyway, I'm kind of back to that point where I would say in a perfect world, I would say, no, I support a 35-cent bag fee to see if it has the desired effect on customer behavior and mitigate and creates that, you know, creates that trajectory towards, or that reduction goal that we want. You know, I'm kind of versus, you know, flying in the face of state statute and putting pressure where it belongs to affect that change, knowing that this should inform, you know, the people who are there to do that. So that's kind of where I'm stuck. And again, I understand clearly how important this is, what an important thing it is to do. I'm kind of stuck on the precedent side of doing this, and think it's important that as a government, we just don't say, yeah, you guys you're not moving fast enough, so we're taking it into our own hands. And I know it's not totally analogous to some of the things that have happened at the national state level. You know, how we've affected change in marijuana legislation, for example. And I'm sure there's a plethora of other examples, but this week, I think, to me, just highlighted how critical it is to be very clear about the message we're sending here. You know, as a government, and want to make sure I understand it. I mean, I do understand how important it is, but right now, I would not be in favor of a ban for that reason. I mean, for all the right reasons, we should have one, but I don't support us as a town moving forward with.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. Jesse, did you want to
Yeah, and I was just thinking about this, Dan, as you were talking, and I think that one of the precedents, I guess, that we have on our side is that we are in a home rule state, and it is our authority as a home rule jurisdiction to be able to take additional steps beyond state statute to do things like this when the state, is not taking aggressive enough steps in the view of the community. So that's point number one. And number two, I think the communities that have done the bag ban have, at least in this state, historically been very tourist and visitor driven. And I think the reason that they've had to take that step is because the nature of the visitor is that they don't have as many opportunities to bring reusable bags, to plan ahead, to think through, to understand the rules before they get here. And because of that, they're willing to pay the fee for convenience sake. And so I think that having a ban in place just from a systemic perspective just doesn't allow that waste to be generated in the first place. It's not a choice of the visitor anymore. It's just, that's the way it is. And I think, if you look at the Aspens and the Tellurides and the Steamboats and the Avons of Colorado, those are the communities that have taken the most aggressive steps. And so, I think that the resort community piece is a factor that, the Denvers of the world don't really have to contend with as much, because people in Denver can plan ahead and can avoid that fee as necessary. So just two things as you were talking that I thought about.
Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, two thoughts. One is, Dan, I would probably agree with you if we were the first mountain town to be having this conversation, but I appreciate the other towns, including Dillon and Silverthorne, that are ahead of us on this proposal. So precedent is others have done it, and here we are falling behind. The other game changer for me was the math that our little town of a couple of grocery stores uses 1 million bags a year. And that is just an overwhelming number to me that says we need to change our practices. So for those two reasons, I look forward to this becoming a thing. I also think that we are hopefully, to Andy held your position, we are hopefully on a slippery slope that will allow us to make comment on styrofoam clamshells and all that kind of stuff. That I'm happy to have that conversation down the road, but I'm really proud of what we're doing with this.
Thanks, Andrew. Now, just to clarify, Silverthorne is not going down this path, but Breckenridge is. So
Sorry.
Dillon and Breckenridge.
Is one of Dillon or Silverthorne doing it?
Dillon is looking into it. Silverthorne is not at this point. Yep. I think they're going to see what happens. But I'd be happy personally if they're the odd ones out in the county, and that's the way hopefully it goes, because of if we're 1 million bags, as you said, I can only imagine what Silverthorne and Dillon contribute, knowing their the business volume of their grocery retailers. Andy Held, go ahead.
Thank you. This is a question for Gilly. Gilly, do you have any idea the cost of sourcing a whole new bag? Like how much is a bag per bag? How much is a plastic bag when you buy 5,000 of them? Or if you buy 5,000 paper bags with 40% post-consumer. So are those numbers very different? Do you have any idea? Does anybody have any idea?
All of the studies that I've been looking at are based on the environmental impact of each of them. I have not looked at the costs per se, but from an anecdotal standpoint, I do know that the large retailers that we do have in town already have to do this in many other cities and states. And so I don't think that it would be that big of a burden on them. I'm not sure about the smaller retailers. Jesse, would you have any idea from your Breckenridge standpoint?
Yeah, so the larger quantities of paper that you're buying, the lower the cost, and it becomes more price comparable with what they might be buying now. a lot of the small retailers are already selling more boutique type bags anyway, and many of them are at the 100% recycled content level. So they're already exceeding that. I know in Breckenridge City Market already has 40% recycled content. I would imagine, to Gilly's point, that Safeway, I don't know that Walmart has any paper bags at the moment, but you know, they're having to do this in other communities too. But the more you buy of those bags, the closer the price is to normal, to what they might be spending anyway.
And Mayor and Council, we have had experience doing this type of ordinance in California. As Gilly mentioned, it's throughout the state, it is banned. So the stores there, so Walmart, Safeway, already have this in their stream of products available to offer. So it's not necessarily a new cost to them. That it may not be the case for natural grocers, things like that.
Other, oh, Andy, you're muted still.
Sorry about that. The big guys already have their process and systems in place in order to do this. Really no big deal to them. But the Bobby Starkos, you know, what does this mean? Like, you know, does Bobby buy 1,000 bags? Does Bobby buy 5,000 bags? Does he now have to buy 20,000 bags in order to make the price about the same? You know, is this just a big price difference? And I am literally trying to shop right now to compare prices. You know, I'm looking on Alibaba.com. So I'll let you know what I figure out. Otherwise, I really think we are not the only ones doing this. This is an important thing to do. It's not like we're taking bags away from everybody. We're still offering paper bags. It shouldn't be a business killer for any small business that already hands out plastic bags. I think they just have to figure out their process to get to that point. So I'd say I'm in favor.
Thanks, Andy. And Dan, I'll let some reason. Thanks, Andy. Sounds like to turn Siri on my computer. I apologize about that if you heard that. Dan, go ahead.
Just a question for Thad. Thad, can you just, for my edification, just summarize the current state statute that relates to plastic bag bans or plastic of any? Can you review that real quick?
It doesn't require a summary. It's a single sentence. It provides as follows: no unit of local government shall require or prohibit the use or sale of specific types of plastic materials or products, or restrict or mandate containers, packaging, or labeling for any consumer products.
And as a home rule municipality, is it to go to Jesse's point? Is it much like we see with our relationship in other ways with the state? We can be more restrictive but not less, or is there any what is any guidelines in that realm?
Under home rule authority in Colorado, municipalities can adopt provisions of law that conflict with state law. And in some instances, those local conflicting laws will trump state laws. The question is, the question in each instance comes down to whether the state and local law are addressing a matter of purely local concern, statewide concern, or a mixed question of local and statewide concern. If a court determines that the local ordinance is addressing anything other than a matter of purely local concern, those are the words of the cases, then the state statute trumps and will prevail over a conflicting local statute. The question of whether something addresses a matter of purely local concern, statewide concern, or is a mixed question really needs to be examined by looking at the case law, but it looks at factors that you would expect. Is there extraterritorial impact to the local law? Is there a statewide scheme being promoted by the state statute that is inhibited by conflicting local laws? It is those kinds of questions that would be examined by a court in determining whether a local statute would prevail over a statewide statute. What I can tell you about this particular statute, this particular prohibition, is that it is part of a statute that's express purpose is to promote recycling. Among other things that the statute does, for instance, is mandate that manufacturers, like exists in other states and maybe even on a national level, the statute mandates that the makers of plastics, manufacturers of plastics, label those plastics with respect to their recyclability. You know, the little triangular thing on the bottom with the number inside tells you what kind of plastic it is, what recycling stream it would need to go in with other plastics to be recycled. What the state statute claims that it is a matter of statewide concern and that there needs to be uniformity of standards in order to promote the recycling industry on a statewide basis. And that is what it purports, at least as its reason for preempting local government. The section of statute that I read is titled Local Government Preemption. I think it's pretty clear what the intention of the legislature was. Having said that, there are more than one instance, there have been more than one instances in state law and examination of state and local conflicts where courts have held that regardless of the fact that a statute may have said it's addressing a matter of statewide concern and that it would be frustrated, that nonetheless a statute addresses a matter of purely local concern and the statute must give way. So what I'm saying is the statute purports to address a matter of statewide concern. That doesn't make it so. And until a court says that's so, we don't have a whole lot of guidance. But there in a nutshell is home rule authority versus state statute. We just don't have guidance in this instance. No one's prohibition has been brought up and challenged. No one has had to defend their home rule authority in adopting a prohibition.
Well, got it. That was well said and very helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Andy,
You know, if that statute was really addressing statewide concern, we would have a statewide recycling program where every community would have an equal opportunity to recycling markets, and that is simply not the case. Recycling is extremely localized in the state of Colorado, and you know, for the proponents of that statute to make that argument is just it's ludicrous. So with that, I heard 3 people that were in favor, so I'm prepared to make a motion. And I need to find my agenda.
Wait, if I could, Jesse.
Go ahead.
May I? Thank you. Just so we understand here, it looks to me that for a small business, buying bags from Uline is going to spend about 3 times as much for bags on paper bags, comparatively for just buying plastic. So, you know, for the amount you get, we should just be aware that this is what we are laying on small businesses. If say small businesses charged a bag fee, could they keep it to offset the amount they spend on their own bags?
so Gilly wanted to jump in and then I'll have Thad or Nancy answer that second question. Gilly, go ahead.
So the way that our bag fee is currently formatted, they can retain up to $100 a month from the bag fees that they remit. So for the first couple of months up until August of 2020, they could retain up to $1,000 for signage, for purchasing bags, like reusable bags. So if the business does charge a fee, they are able to keep up to $100 per month.
Am I still
They
on
can
mute?
also charge a takeout fee of $10 if they want to, right?
Good.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a pass-through cost, and it's a pass-through cost that I think is gonna go to our visitors more than the locals, and I think that's where, the benefit comes in of the whole program.
Yeah, I think as long as we make that clear to our small businesses that are going to have to take this on, and then also getting back to what it was earlier, we want to allow at least enough time to go through the stock of bags that you have before the next order of bags. And I don't know, that's maybe a question for Dan, how often you order to-go bags, and in COVID, obviously it's probably more. But yeah, as long as we're fully aware of the onus it puts on the small businesses compared to all the big boxes who are basically ready and available and prepared to do this because they've already had to do it. This is now something new for our small businesses. I think they should embrace it as long as they can see that it's not going to cost their bottom line big time, like 3 times as much. If they could keep a bag fee and charge a bag fee on every to-go order, then I think that would be fine. They would need to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to clarify my answer to your price question. I didn't realize you were asking plastic to paper. I thought you were asking about 100% virgin paper to 40% recycled content. So I just want to clarify my answer, but thank you for the additional information.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, Andy, to your point, hopefully as we transition out or back towards a more regular model, takeout becomes less, but certainly, any business that does any kind of takeout, that's, it's there. I'm going to say probably it's in terms of, effect to the bottom line, as you probably well know, it's nominal. And every time, you 2-3 times a year when you price your menu, you everything goes up, prices change, commodities change all the time. So that's one of the things that they'll have time, people have time to deal with. I don't know. I'm very curious how we're going to line out. I know Gilly is, or how the bag fee money as it accrues to when it goes away, kind of what our goal is with that. There might be a way, Andy, I don't know, maybe we can look at some kind of outreach. Maybe we can source something. Maybe there's a way we can help out in that regard, but I don't count it up there as one of those, obstacles that, it's there, need to be aware of it. Maybe there's a way we can help, but I think people can navigate around that pretty easily. Just to be clear, one of the reasons I asked that is, and the answer was so helpful, is it does really help me understand. And I think it is critical to understand that this really is a local issue for me. And that was very helpful in getting me able to really understand how that's more than enough wedge for me to drive my truck through, my recycling truck. So I appreciate that. I think that is critical in terms of precedent. So thank you. And I support it.
Andrew.
Yeah, and I apologize for bringing this up now, but violation and penalties. We have made, if we pass this as it is, the penalty is only on the employee who hands the bag to the customer, which I find inappropriate, meaning our $10 an hour employees aren't really going to make that determination, nor are they going to know. Somewhere in here should be holding the business's feet to the fire, not the employee. And I don't know if that's a change we can make before second reading, but I find that to be something that definitely needs attention. Other than that, I love this.
Absolutely. We can work on that for second reading and at least broaden it out to include managers, those in control and operation.
Could we just check that all council agrees with that change?
Yeah. Thanks for catching
And
that.
if there's a maker of the motion, you would want to maybe put that in your motion to make that change.
I think Jesse was ready for a motion, and we do have discussion time after motions are made, just as a reminder, but Jesse.
All right, I'll give it a go. Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve on first reading ordinance 21-01 and ordinance amending chapter 124 of the Code of Ordinances concerning public health and safety by amending Article 2 thereof concerning a disposable bag fee to establish the prohibition of the use of plastic bags and certain paper bags, and to amend provisions concerning fees for the use of permitted disposable bags. And if we could make an amendment to the penalties section that addresses Andy Aronson's concerns on the record.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Pro Tem Burley and seconded by Councilmember Held. Any further discussion? Can you call the question, please?
Certainly. Aronson.
Yes.
Oh, I might have lost Andy. I will continue on and come back to him. Burley,
Yes.
Fallon,
Yes.
Held,
Yes.
Incan,
Yes.
Sherburne, absent, Mortensen,
Yes.
and do we have Mr. Aronson back?
I think, can you hear me?
We can
I
hear you.
can hear you. Thank you.
Yes, I'll work on the camera next. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pass. Thank you, Gilly, for your work on that. I'm excited with the direction we're heading. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 2, an old business. I've been looking forward to reading this all week. I just tell you that much. This is second reading of ordinance 20-23, an ordinance amending the chapter 180 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Frisco concerning the Unified Development Code by amending subsection 180-2.5.2.b.1 concerning thresholds for site plan review type, and subsection 185-1-1.5 concerning the table of allowed uses, section 180-5.2 concerning use specific standards, and subsection 180-5.2.3 concerning outdoor storage areas, and subsection 180-5.3.3 concerning solar energy facilities, and section 180-6.4.1 concerning improvements agreements, and section 180-6.5 concerning land disturbing activities, section 180-6.6.2 concerning drainage plans, design standards, and section 180-6.6.4 concerning erosion and sediment control, and section 180-6.7 concerning water quality, subsection 180-6.11.2 concerning non-vehicular access requirements, and subsection 180-6.13.1 concerning parking and loading requirements applicability, subsection 180-6.13.3 concerning on-premise parking requirements, and subsection 180-6.13.4 concerning bicycle parking, subsection 180-6.13.7 concerning snow storage areas, and subsection 180-6.14.2 concerning landscaping and revegetation requirements, applicability, and subsection 180-6.14.5.e concerning revegetation of disturbed land, and subsection 180-6.17 concerning refuse management, and subsection 180-9.3 concerning general definitions. I'm happy to open up the public hearing and turn it over to staff. And Susan, are you taking this one?
I'll take this one. Thank you, Hunter. That was a wonderful reading of the ordinance title. The purpose of the ordinance is to bring an additional layer of sustainability into our land use code regulations, as well as to align the Unified Development Code with our new Sustainable Building Code. Town Council approved this ordinance on first reading, and staff is recommending approval of the ordinance on second reading. We have not received any public comment regarding this ordinance.
Great. Thank you. Any follow-up questions for Susan at this time? Seeing no council questions, I'll open up for public comment. Is there any public comment concerning this agenda item? Seeing no public comment, I will close public comment and back to council discussion. And if someone is making a motion, I do not believe you have to read the whole thing, just just the ordinance number.
No discussion, huh?
I see no discussion. I think we're
All right, all right, all right. Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve on second reading ordinance 20-23.
moved by our Mayor Pro Tem Burley. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Aronson. Can you call the question, please?
Certainly. Burley,
Yes.
Fallon,
Yes.
Held,
Yes.
Incan,
Yes.
Sherburne, absent, Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate your work on that. Moving on to agenda item number 3. This is second reading of ordinance 20-24, an ordinance approving lease agreement with New Singular Wireless PCS LLC for use of a portion of the certain real property known as 102 School Road, also known as the Public Works Shop, for the installation and maintenance of cellular telecommunications facilities. I will open up the public hearing, turn it over to staff, and Vanessa, welcome, good evening.
Mayor, Council, good evening. I have a much less exciting and shorter title for the ordinance that you're considering upon second reading. It's regarding a lease agreement with New Singular Wireless, more commonly known as AT&T. And since this was last before you in December, I don't have any updates regarding this ordinance or agreement.
Any specific questions for Vanessa? Seeing no council questions, I'll open it up for public comment. Seeing no public comment, I will close public comment, turn over to council discussion, and perhaps a motion. For better cell service for AT&T users in Frisco.
I move, unless somebody has comment, I move that we approve the second reading of ordinance 2024 as provided in the agenda.
It's been moved by Councilmember Aronson. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Pro Tem Burley. Can you call the question, please?
Certainly. Fallon,
Yes.
Held,
Yes.
Incan,
Yes.
Sherburne, absent, Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next item is agenda item number 4. This is our continuing general discussion and action on the COVID-19 response. I'll open up the hearing and turn it to staff and Nancy.
Pretty sure, Mayor, you said my name, but you were cutting in and out, so go with that.
Yeah, so agenda, do I need to read the general discussion around the COVID-19 response, and Nancy?
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Mayor and Council, as always, is on there to talk about what's going on with COVID in terms of organizationally, sometimes federal issues, state, and so on. We know with the federal government that we probably will see another stimulus package coming out. We know that we have new PPP funds available. So we're trying to make those really noted to the business community. We continue to meet with the business community. We have regular meetings with them, and council's adoption of the grant program in December, the next round of grants. We put out the word, and I want to give you an update on where that's at. First, I just want to really commend Vanessa for pulling all this together. The system that we have now, I've mentioned, is a good system. It's able to get through the grants and lots of review stages and get funding to them pretty quickly. the getting a report out of the system, not so easy. So thank you, Vanessa. We have just about 70 applications now in process or have been completed. The total amount that we are either given out already, meaning it's in their hand, or we're about to approve it, but what's in the system right now that looks to be awarded, just about $150,000. 5 innovation grants. Out of that 155 of them were innovation. All the rest remain for general assistance. The most of them went to restaurants, some retail, personal fitness, lodging, co-working, concert venue, personal services, printing, company, things like that. Some council members have asked me, what about the ones that have not been eligible? We've only had 3. So 3 that are not eligible. Business that did not have its occupancy limit due to a public health order. In other words, if the business lost money or had a reduced revenue between last year and this year, many businesses did, but if it wasn't directly the result of the public health order, in other words, they could stay open, they're open the whole time, but less people are here, that wouldn't have met council's criteria. So 1 business with that. 1 did not have the threshold of a loss of income that is starting at 16% or greater. 1, we're waiting for some information to come back. Some of the businesses had some trouble, needed a lot of help in gathering some of the documents. There's been a lot of outreach as well. I think you've all seen that. We do have a number of applications in process, meaning they go to business license review first, then we review all of their income and make sure that it meets all of this council's criteria first. And then the income that is done by the finance department. And then either Bonnie or I make final review decisions to issue the checks. So that is the overall process of the applications. Once we saw that we needed a little more media outreach again after the holidays, we think folks were a little bit busy with what they were doing, which is a good sign. We put the word out and saw an increase in applications. We're continuing to do a lot of outreach. I could certainly have Vanessa weigh in on all the extra outreach that she's doing. There has been some additional work that's been needed for some businesses. I happen to also know there are a lot more businesses that do qualify that haven't applied. Not sure why they haven't applied. We have the sales tax numbers from businesses. We've done some reports for you. We did it by business for a while, so I know some of those businesses could qualify on the general criteria. And I'm not sure why people aren't applying and going through the process and then seeing whether they qualify or not. But there are more that still qualify to meet the council's goals. I think overall, council said we wanted to target the money to those who are most in need. The grants that are of the largest amount, $10,000, are going to those that lost the most amount of money, meaning not the most of all businesses, but they met that criteria of exceeding 30% decline. It's heartbreaking to read some of these applications and the data and the amount of money that they have lost. So the program is working to target the greatest resources to those of greatest need among those who've applied. Happy to answer questions about those things. I just want to make also another couple comments. There's been a lot of questions about when do we get back together? Are we staff? We're talking internally quite a bit about when do we go back to the office full time in terms of in the office. Unfortunately, our numbers are looking a little bit worrisome right now. Our number of people positive per 100,000 is creeping back up. I think we're a little bit more concerned right now that we could end up going back. We're in the red level right now, but if we continue in the trend we're heading, we could potentially lose all of the gains that we've made. So we really need to keep these numbers down before we talk about expanding uses. We'd have to be in the orange level solidly for 7 days. So all of the metrics have to be orange, meaning 350 per 100,000 positive for COVID or less for 7 days before we could get into an orange program. Also, I had a lot of businesses ask, once we get there, do we have to do something else to get a yellow 5-star program to operate at the yellow level? Actually, no. We've learned that because we've already been approved as a county for the program, the county doesn't have to reapply, but we have a few steps that have to be done and the business would have to be re-inspected. But that's not where we're heading right now. So I just want to caution the council and I've been cautioned staff, we're going to continue to keep our distance and work remotely as much as possible where we can, when we can, because the numbers are not helping us out right now.
Thank you for bringing that up, Nancy. I appreciate that because yeah, it's we are definitely starting to trend in a scary direction again. And if you didn't see, Pitkin County just rolled back the entire county to red and pretty strict restrictions that they had to re-implement. So
It was a couple months late in coming for them. They were able to operate much lower than they ought to have for a long time. I had a question on vaccines, Nancy. Today the CDC made new guidelines and the president has, I don't know if authorized is the word, but directed more vaccine doses to be released. Do you know if Governor Polis is going to be looking at that 65-year-old age group for Colorado? I know that our public health department and our healthcare providers have done a really, really good job and we're doing really, really well on vaccinations as far as I can tell. But I'm just curious about the new kind of national guidance and what our public health department's going to do.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. So you're right. Summit County has actually been used as an example for how well they've been distributing the vaccines. Health officials from other counties have come and witnessed what they're doing, as well as CDPHE, to say this is a good example. So yes, whatever's being given, we're giving it out. And so as a county is using its vaccines, it gets more. So the criteria doesn't necessarily change, but you can get more people vaccinated. The new national guidelines, each state may be able to implement it or not. I hesitate only because they're all following that because they want to get more out. So I expect Governor Polis to issue a statement. I haven't checked today, just been prepping for a meeting. So I don't know. I didn't see anything come out today, but there has been discussion about making sure that they follow those federal guidelines and get it out sooner. And we've been doing such a good job of it. The county has, rather. I won't take credit from them. The county's been doing such a good job of that. As soon as that's available, I'm sure that they will, but I can't speak for them in that sense. I will get the word to you right away. I'll check with the county health and with the manager to find out. The one thing that they were disappointed about, that the county has just issued comments about, is that, the way the county's doing is prioritizing, making sure prioritizing all of our local residents is important. So I don't have a specific answer. I will get that for you. And quickly, the county's been responding to the state's implementation, and the state, Governor Polis, has been exemplified for what kind of rollout he's done. So I wouldn't anticipate there'd be any delay if they can possibly roll that number down.
Dan, go ahead.
Thanks, Nancy. Circling back to the BAP and the BIG, a couple comments. One question for sure. On the innovation grant, I was just trying to look it back up. Can you review the criteria by which an application would be rewarded? How specific is it? Is there, what amount of latitude exists in interpretation of that ask? If only 5 have applied, might we expand the criteria a little bit so that maybe businesses that were outside of one program for another might have opportunity to get reimbursement through this? And then I'll have another comment about the BAP, but can you talk about that criteria quickly?
Yes, I'm going to look for it real quick so I don't forget, but let me just say it's very easy to get that grant. It's as long as they utilized as long as they spent money. I'm just looking on our, do you have, actually I have it here. Do you want to pull that up? I see you've logged back, joined again, Vanessa.
Well, I would say one thing really quickly first, and then, yeah, we can go through what the requirements are. But there have been 5 innovation grants paid out so far. I don't know how many of the 14 applications that still haven't been paid out. I can figure that out. Are innovation grants. And then in terms of grant process, there are 10 applicants that are still working on the innovation grant part of their application. So they can sign in and keep working on those applications. In terms of requirements, I think more notable ones, you need to have a business license, of course. You also, for this one, need to be within the town of Frisco's jurisdiction, but also in a commercially zoned area, which is different, of course, than what you approved for the general grant. And then as per council's guidance, operational expenses are not eligible. So that means things that are consumable, things like rubbing alcohol, cleaning supplies, even the labor for cleaning. These are, let's think of them as capital investments. So things like heaters and filters and improvements like having more outdoor seating with picnic tables and even umbrellas. It's pretty wide in terms of the range of things that we've approved, including technological adaptations, like needing a Zoom account and paying for that. Some of the fitness folks have applied because they need special video equipment and computers to deal with live streaming. So the way that you wrote or approved the ordinance, it was actually, we have a fair amount of latitude. And I'm sorry about the misunderstanding. It is more than 5 people who have applied. Those are just the folks who have gotten payment already.
So Councilmember Fallon, specifically as written into the resolution, it was referred to as things like outdoor dining or filtration, new and improved, no touch features. I think we did approve and POS, I remember. Technology. It is very broad. It really was more strict on what was excluded was the cleaning supplies. And I think there was one that I recall, a grant that we excluded a few of those things. It's been very easy. You simply submit your receipts and demonstrate that you used money, some kind of money. We didn't ask where you got it from or anything like that, to implement these changes, and you got reimbursed.
Okay, that was my question. I wasn't clear on cleaning or cleaning versus PPE. You know, you hear this a lot in terms of conversations about, business loss over this time, and it's always qualified by, there's been, X number of dollars lost during this period of time, and that doesn't include COVID-related expenses, right? You hear this a lot.
But the innovation grant, the innovation grant does not require that.
Does that require
any business loss of income or anything?
Yeah, no, but my point is that COVID-related expenses are really significant. So, and I was curious about this even since the last meeting when we talked about this, to really try and appreciate, some businesses, if they had to go out and buy a large allotment of PPE, if it was shields or masks or gowns or and if it related to signage within a business, to direct people to move, to direct people through and about a business, things of that nature. Certainly there are labor costs involved with accommodating traffic in businesses and things of that nature. So I'm just kind of curious in terms of the overall spend on the amount that we had. I think we had maybe a fixed amount to spend. I wasn't sure if our goal was at this point, or not a goal necessarily, but in terms of reevaluating the success of the program, to see that, all right, we wanted to get to people who were in a certain situation first. Is it appropriate now to look at some parameters that would stretch those boundaries just a little bit? And, in terms of the innovation grant, allowing people to apply to recover some of those costs, COVID-related costs, without a doubt, that certainly would be over and above what typically they would have had to spend if it was over a certain amount of money. Some businesses may have been more impacted than others, and in some businesses that might have been substantial. And I don't know if they've been able to look at that. Another pivoting back to the business program, the assistance program. One thing to keep in mind here is that there are businesses who really were affected by, this is an economic crisis that really transcended businesses that were directly affected by public health orders. When certain businesses and many businesses were closed, other businesses were tangentially affected, and it was not their fault. As people lose jobs, as businesses displaced, as services are not required anymore, those businesses also proportionately suffered. When we initiated and rolled out the Promenade, you got to remember, we helped restaurants in a lot of different ways. Even just allowing that in-kind contribution of street space to allow restaurants to expand turned into a boon for many restaurants. I'd say the majority of restaurants were able to leverage this, when tourists came back to the county, they were able to exploit that traffic, and some restaurants had record summers. Other businesses that don't have the business model, they couldn't leverage Main Street the same way, or again, were negatively impacted by the Promenade, for example, in terms of how people were able to access their business because of a certain kind of business model. They did not experience the same. They did not experience the same success. I mean, that largesse of having the street to extend to many restaurants was not experienced by some other business.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
Can you? Where are we going?
Where I'm going is creating creating or see if there's an opportunity here to evaluate broadening the parameters of that. And I'm not quite sure how to do it. I might be able to glean that from a conversation to understand what people's concerns are, but to see if there's a way we can expand that to include those several businesses or some other businesses that were tangentially affected from COVID-related public health orders, but not directly affected. So I want to put that out there and see if there's any willingness to discuss that. Does that answer your question?
Andy Helder, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Dan, I think they should go through and try to meet the criteria, if they've been tangentially affected in comparison to those who actually innovated and changed in order to deal with the situation. I think we should support them for sure. But do we need to go further than we already are at this point? That I don't know. I do have a question for Vanessa or Nancy of for the innovation grants. So say a business is putting in heaters, outdoor heaters, right? And so, this is a process, right? They got to go through the process. They got to do it all. At this point, would they have already, or should they have already applied for the grant, even though they haven't completed the job and they don't necessarily know what the cost is? Obviously, they should have some sort of estimate, but is this? Do we have a time limit on those innovation grants as far as, if I'm working on, or if somebody's working on getting their heaters in and they're not complete, does it have to be by a certain time?
Yes, Councilmember Held, it's a reimbursement grant, so they need to pay for it first. This is reimbursement of those expenses. The council has not set a date to close these applications. Period. They were prioritized. I'm just going to pull up the resolution real quick because Vanessa, am I wrong? Is there a date? I think there is a date, January 31st.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
January 31st at this point.
Yes.
And we've definitely had people say, hey, I want to make this innovation. Is it eligible? And
Right.
call. And of course we'll say, yes, heaters, filters. Yeah. Oh yeah, do that. Absolutely. Zoom subscription. Oh yeah, make sure you throw that in there. We've even reached back to businesses that we've heard through the grapevine, you're using Zoom for your business. Why didn't you put that on your innovation grant and reopened it so they could apply that expense and we could reimburse for it.
So, so thank you for that, Vanessa. So it is a reimbursement grant. We have a lot of people who have called to say, I am going to do it now. So hold on, let me go do it. And then they can apply. They don't start their application until they've spent it. That's on the innovation grant. I also want to address, Councilmember Fallon mentioned folks who have spent, who also lost revenue. That is correct. These are many of those comments, Councilmember Fallon, were all councils. That's your choice. Just want to reiterate, it is your choice to develop that criteria. Those who are directly affected by the public health order was part of the goal at meeting those who were most significantly impacted. There are obviously other impacts to businesses that lost money as a result, or revenue as a result of the situation. One other comment about that is that the application process was a little bit clumsy, I might want to say, not the system so much as they had to get a lot of information. So some of them started and faltered until Vanessa and quite a few other people reached out and helped them through it.
Jesse, go ahead.
Question for you first. We did expand the geographical boundaries of eligibility. Have we seen any businesses outside of the commercial district?
Outside of the commercial district, I'm not sure, but to the point we were worried about or concerned of the home business, we have not had an application.
Okay.
So one application so far from a home business.
Well,
It was a ski tuning business, and it was really super interesting. That person ended up figuring out that because their residential, wait for this, rent is $400 a month. And I had to go back a few times, like $400 a month for everything. They would own, and they claim they use 20% of their business. They didn't feel like it was worth it for them to fill out the application and go through the process. Although we absolutely offered to help them do that, because it would have been such a low grant just because their residential rent was only $400 a month. So I've spoken to a second person who has a finished carpentry business last Saturday or Friday, and they are going to apply. I haven't seen their application come across yet, but we've given them all the guidance and phone numbers, and they can call us to help figure it out. Those are it so far.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
we don't have one that's been submitted yet.
I think to, I guess to Dan's question, I do, this is, and I don't want to sound like totally harsh, but at some point we have to draw a line in the sand that says that, businesses were directly affected by COVID. I kind of compare business loss to like a bad snow year. Like if you lose money because people aren't coming here because it's a bad snow year, the government's not going to step in and say, how much did that bad snow year affect your business? Here, I'm going to give you a grant to overcome that. And so I think the criteria that we have is appropriate because it's directly tied to the impacts of the public health order. And I'm comfortable with leaving it that way. I think where Andy Held might have been going is the date for the innovation grant. And I would be willing to extend that deadline because I think that the fact that we rolled this out right over the holidays, we might be seeing businesses that just frankly, were busy trying to get into the 5-star program, or they were just busier than they thought they would be, and they just haven't had time to apply. So I think the deadline is something that I would be willing to be flexible on, but I think our criteria right now is sufficient, and I'm not in a hurry to spend this money. If these businesses, want to take their time and really truly figure this out, like let's let them do it.
Also, I just want to make a note, it's for both grants, the deadline. So yeah, and we would need to amend the resolution. So it'd be we could bring the resolution back as easy at the next meeting. Because the resolution had a hard date in there. And I'd like council direction whether you want it open dated or not. In other words, we could bring it back saying, keep this grant period open until council closes it. Might be approach.
How do people feel about bringing that back at an amendment to the resolution at the next meeting to extend that date? See, Andy, Jesse, Dan.
Mine's a comment, not a thumbs up.
Okay, and then Andrew, comment.
Basically, my view is nothing happens without a deadline. And if unless somebody tells me, I mean, holidays are over, all of a sudden we're going to catch that window between now and President's Day, and then it's crazy spring break, we hope. So, I mean, do I think it's a big deal? No. But I really think that it's easier almost for Vanessa to be able to tell the restaurants, you know, you only have another week to do this, than pushing that back 2 weeks or a month. And then she's probably going to have the same conversation a month later. So strong opinion, no. Nothing happens without a deadline. So let's keep the deadline.
Okay, I appreciate that, but I think I saw enough consensus from the rest of the group so let's bring back for a discussion at the next meeting an amendment to extend the deadline. Go ahead, Dan.
Just a last point, and in terms of you know, Jesse, what you were talking about. Yeah, you know, I understand the point you're trying to make. The difference, of course, is that, you know, when we shut down the economy, we've got to look past. I think we can look past what, you know, past the direct effects of, you know, those public orders that identified certain businesses. And, you know, we know that these businesses are so interlinked in our economy that it has to affect others. That you can't do one and not another. This is not a natural event that I think everybody would understand. And I understand you're probably trying to grab something that's analogous. I don't think that is in particular, because COVID is such a unique event, and, you know, and resonated throughout the economic strata so thoroughly that, and my intent from the very first time we talked about this back in April was to be as inclusive as possible. And if we could identify people who we know were dramatically affected and could demonstrate that, try out to figure out a way to get them help. If it appears that there's going to be some dollars left in this fund, no, I don't want to just throw money away because we have it. But if we circle back around here after you know, when these deadlines are done, and it looks like there's a possibility we can figure out a way to help some other people, I just think we ought to try and figure out a way to do it. We might not be talking about, again, a lot of businesses, as we found out through our last discussion about when we expanded this program. Maybe there's not many, but maybe we can make a difference in some. And to me, that's worthwhile. So those are all the points. You know, we talked about, we started this at 15%. We could easily come back and look at 10%. We could look at some other criteria that would be more inclusive without being, I think, creating big obstacles or creating a process that's any more difficult to navigate. So those are my points, and I appreciate having the discussion about it. I'd like to keep it on the table as long as practical, but I appreciate everybody.
Dan, just real quick, do you have an example of a business maybe that you've been talking to that would fit that criteria?
The easiest and most obvious is the laundromat. You know, this is a business that, you know, when things closed, when short-term rentals close, when cleaning companies go away, when people stop working, you know, when you can't, and then when the promenade starts, when you can't easily access a place. Now we're talking about year-over-year changes. So that wraps up a lot of these, you know, a lot of the marginal, you know, the kind of the marginal revenue that comes back. If we look at this year over year, that helps us identify businesses that we're not able to recover, you know, even when things came back more in the summertime. They just, you know, the laundromat, for example, does not have a business model that can, that can, you know, that realizes, you know, the positive effects of the promenade, if you will. You know, it's just not that kind of a business. It suffered. It didn't come back the same way. Might there be others? You know, I've tried to think about it, but I think that's a business I think you can identify as saying, wow, that business got beat up a couple different ways, and it just is not going to come back the way a restaurant can, you know, because we just threw their business out into the street. It's not like
Has he applied and been rejected?
I believe he probably might have been one of the ones who was, yes. So anyway, that's my point. And, you know, there might have been another business that at 10% might have got something back. Again, we're looking at year over year losses. We picked 15. We didn't know where we'd be, how much we'd spend. And I'm working backwards from that number to see, can we be more inclusive? without pushing the boundaries of that spend too much. I'm just trying to see if it's workable as we continue to massage this. Is it practical to reach out, identify some of those businesses and find a way to help them if they could demonstrate that need?
Thanks, Dan. I agree with you, Dan. I think I'm not opposed to. I think as you said, let's keep that door open and keep it on the table and let's see where we end up, and maybe at the next meeting when we discuss a further date for the deadline, we'll have a better idea of funds left and who we haven't captured and where we aren't kind of filling those few. And I think it's a lot like what you brought up and argued successfully for or discussed last time is that kind of home business group. And we were worried about what that might do. And it obviously hasn't had a massive effect. So I think it's important to keep it on the table because I think there is opportunity there as we keep kind of moving forward. Other questions, concerns, thoughts around our COVID response? So we'll look at amending the resolution with extending the date for applications for both processes at the next meeting. Great.
Also, I didn't know if council wanted an update on the Love Frisco program. It's essentially concluded. It's in terms of the gift cards, it was all used, went really well. This went even better than the summer program.
That's great. Thank you for making that happen.
All Tasha and Vanessa, Tasha, great job.
And I did get lots of feedback in different meetings I've been on over the past few months about that program specifically. It caught a lot of people's eyes. So thank you for all the hard work.
Yeah, I think shop local programs are really great. They're just nothing bad about it. It's just great programs. Vanessa, I think she might wanted to say something.
Yep.
No, I do because you still have a few days. It's until the 15th and we are below $5,000. So kudos to council for having your crystal ball must be in good shape on that program because you decided that was plenty of funding and you were right. And people have just used it like crazy. So you can still purchase Love Frisco CO. So go there and do it.
Like 3 more days, I think, right?
Got it.
Purchase for 3 more days. How long can you use it for?
You can use the bonus until March 31st per council's guidance. And then the ones you purchased are good forever. No fees until after a year.
We lost the mayor.
Sorry about that. Puppy problem. I apologize. Any further conversation? Great. Then the next item on the agenda is executive sessions, agenda item number 5. Everyone on council should have received an email from Deborah with a new login for the executive session. However, we still do need to have a motion to enter into and a vote for that.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes, that's
just for clarity of the record, that motion should be referenced as stated to CRS 246424F for personnel matters for purposes of conducting the annual performance evaluation of the manager. We should always include as much information as possible without hindering the confidential nature. And it's not confidential that you're conducting the evaluation. It's confidential what's being said. So just for clarity of the record.
great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Like he said.
Do we have a motion with Thad's addition?
I think I got this one. Mr. Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, parentheses 4, parentheses F, personnel matters related to the annual performance evaluation of the town manager.
Motion's been made by Pro Tem Burley. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by, I think I heard Councilmember Aronson first. So can you call the question, please?
Certainly. Held.
Yes.
Incan. We lost Rick. I will come back to Mr. Incan. Sherburne absent. Mortensen.
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Burley,
Yes.
and Mr. Inkin. Well,
Nancy, are you able to try to give him a call?
I'm doing that right now.
You call me, Deb? I didn't hear you.
Al, I believe I did, but perhaps not. Fallon, just in case.
In that case, yes.
And I have asked Rick to unmute himself. And I have asked him to start video. He's still on here according to the list.
You do have a majority too.
We do.
Okay.
So
All right.
Inkin absent. And everybody, you should have an Outlook, a calendar Outlook with it. Nancy, you are the host, so you will need to start the meeting.
Oh, really? Well, I can't be the host because I'm not going to be in the beginning part.
Okay, well then I will sign in as you and I will be the host.
Okay. And then you'll step out of the meeting somehow or the other.
Yes, well, we'll get that figured out. Thank you.
Can you transfer the host to me? Does that work?
Yes,
Ron,
we
okay.
can.
And then Nancy, I'll just call you or text you when we're ready. So
Okay, thank
it is 7 o'clock now. Let's try to be in the executive session call in the next 5 or so minutes so we can take a break, grab some snacks and some water and anything else. And we'll see you guys on the other side. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.